The cruelest thing about losing someone isn't the day they leave. It's realizing they stopped waiting for you long before they walked away. 1 year ago, the entire world knew my name. Sports channels talked about me. Business magazines printed my face on their covers. Every major network wanted an interview. The World Cup was finally coming to America, and I was one of the men responsible for making it happen. People called me successful, powerful, untouchable. They were wrong. Because while the world was counting down to the biggest tournament on earth, I was quietly losing the only person who had ever loved me before I became someone important. Her name was Natalie Mercer. And the worst part is that she didn't leave because of a scandal. She didn't leave because I betrayed her. She didn't leave because I stopped loving her. She left because every day for years I made her feel like she mattered a little less than everything else. The morning it all began looked ordinary. The kind of morning you forget until it becomes the last normal day of your life. Sunlight spilled through the windows of our apartment overlooking the harbor. Fishing boats drifted across the water in the distance. The smell of fresh coffee floated through the kitchen. Natalie stood behind the counter wearing an oversized gray sweater with sleeves covering half her hands. She always wore that sweater when she was working on inventory for her bookstore cafe. It was old, faded, soft from years of washing. I used to tease her about it. She used to laugh. That morning she wasn't laughing. She sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of receipts, notebooks, and a small wooden box I'd seen 100 times but never bothered to open. My phone vibrated for the 6th time in 10 minutes. Sponsors, executives, reporters. Everyone wanted something. I barely looked up as I grabbed my coffee. Busy day. Natalie asked softly. You have no idea. She nodded. Not disappointed. Not angry. Just quiet. Looking back, that's what I remember most. The quiet. People think relationships end with dramatic fights. Sometimes they end with silence. Sometimes one person simply gets tired of asking to be chosen. Checked another email. Then another text. Then another schedule update. Across the table, Natalie carefully placed something inside the wooden box before sliding the lid closed. I didn't ask what it was. I wish I had. Outside, gulls cried over the water. Inside, my world kept moving forward at full speed while hers seemed frozen in place. Grant, she said after a moment. Do you remember what day next Friday is? I glanced at my calendar. Meetings, travel, interviews, planning sessions, deadlines. Not really. Her smile appeared for half a second before disappearing. That's okay. At the time I thought nothing of it. At the time I thought there would always be another Friday. Another dinner. Another conversation. Another chance to pay attention. I didn't know that Natalie Mercer had already started measuring our relationship differently. Not by the promises I made, but by the promises I broke. And hidden inside that small wooden box sitting on the table beside her was the proof. The following Friday arrived faster than I expected. My calendar was packed from 7 in the morning until nearly midnight. Conference calls, sponsor meetings, site inspections. Every minute accounted for. Every minute valuable. At least that was what I kept telling myself. Around noon, Natalie sent a text. Just 3 words. Do not forget. I saw the message while walking between meetings. I even smiled when I read it. Then another notification appeared. Then another. Within seconds her message disappeared beneath a flood of emails and updates. By 6 o'clock that evening, I had forgotten entirely. The harbor district glowed beneath the orange light of sunset when my driver pulled up outside a renovated brick building near the waterfront. I frowned. Why was I here? Then I saw the string lights hanging above the entrance. The flower boxes beneath the windows. The sign that read Harbor House. My stomach dropped. Natalie was standing outside waiting for me. A cold breeze lifted her hair as she checked her watch. She had been there a while. I could tell by the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The reservation had been for 6. It was now 7:23. I stepped out of the car already apologizing. Natalie, I am sorry. Today got away from me. She looked at me for a long moment before smiling. The smile was gentle, polite. Somehow that felt worse. Of course it did. We went inside. The hostess greeted us with the kind of sympathy usually reserved for people arriving after the movie has already started. A candle flickered between us as we sat near the window overlooking the water. Boats drifted through the harbor. Families laughed at nearby tables. The restaurant smelled like fresh bread and rosemary. It should have been a perfect evening. Instead, it felt like sitting beside someone slowly drifting farther away, while pretending everything was fine. Halfway through dinner, my phone vibrated. I ignored it once, then twice, then a third time. Natalie noticed. She always noticed. "You can answer it," she said. "It seems important." "It can wait." The phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. An executive from the organizing committee. The call could affect months of planning. "Just 1 minute," I said. Her eyes dropped to her plate. "Okay." I stepped outside. 1 minute became 5. 5 became 20. Then 30. When I finally returned, the candle had burned lower. Natalie sat quietly staring through the window at the dark water beyond the glass. Her food was untouched. "I am sorry," I said again. "You are always sorry, Grant." The words were soft. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just tired. For a second, I did not know what to say. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out 2 tickets. Old soccer tickets. Faded at the edges. "Do you remember these?" she asked. I shook my head. She smiled sadly. "I kept every ticket from every game we were supposed to attend together." My chest tightened. There were more tickets beneath them. Dozens. Carefully preserved. Carefully remembered. Things I had forgotten years ago. Natalie gathered them and slipped them back into her purse. Then she looked at me with an expression I could not understand at the time. "You know what the hardest part is?" she asked quietly. "It is not that you are busy. It is that every time I hope things will be different, I end up feeling foolish for hoping at all." I wish I could tell you that her words changed me immediately, that I looked across the table, realized what I was doing, and became a better man overnight. That is not what happened. The truth is much uglier. I heard her. I understood every word. And then I convinced myself she was overreacting. That was the dangerous thing about success. It teaches you to believe every problem can wait until tomorrow. The next few weeks disappeared into a blur of airports, conference rooms, and endless planning sessions. The World Cup was getting closer. Every day brought a new crisis. A sponsor wanted changes. A broadcaster wanted guarantees. A city official wanted answers. My phone never stopped ringing. My inbox never stopped filling. Somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Natalie became another thing I assumed would still be there when I finally had time. One rainy Tuesday evening, I returned home just after 9. The apartment was quiet except for the soft sound of music drifting from the living room. Natalie sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by stacks of books. Small handwritten price tags covered the coffee table. She was preparing for a community fundraiser at her bookstore. Usually she would have told me all about it. Usually she would have asked for my opinion. That night she simply smiled when I walked in. "How was your day?" she asked. "Busy." I figured. She returned to her work. I loosened my tie and checked another email. For several minutes neither of us spoke. The silence felt strange. Not hostile. Just unfamiliar. Like two people sharing the same room while living in different worlds. Then Natalie picked up a flyer from the table. "The fundraiser is Saturday." I nodded without looking up. "That is great. I was hoping you could come." Saturday. I checked my calendar. Meetings. Sponsors. Travel preparations. I am not sure yet. The disappointment flashed across her face so quickly most people would have missed it. I almost missed it too. Almost. "It is okay," she said quietly. "You do not have to decide now." Saturday arrived. I never made it to the fundraiser. In fact, I forgot it was happening until late that evening when I saw a photo online. Natalie stood outside the bookstore beneath strings of white lights. Families filled the sidewalk. Children held cups of hot chocolate. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except Natalie. Even in a photograph I could see it. That same tired smile. The one that never reached her eyes anymore. I called immediately. She answered after the third ring. "Hey. I am sorry. I completely lost track of time." A long pause followed. In the background I heard chairs being folded and boxes being moved. The event was ending. I know, she said. Natalie. It is fine, Grant. There it was again. Fine. The most dangerous word in a relationship. Because sometimes fine means forgiveness. And sometimes it means someone has finally stopped expecting anything from you. After we hung up, I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I noticed something sitting beside the cash register. A small wooden box. The same one from our kitchen table. The lid was open. Inside were dozens of old ticket stubs arranged with perfect care. And for the first time, I found myself wondering how many memories she had been preserving while I was too busy creating new reasons to disappoint her. A month later, the city seemed obsessed with countdown clocks. Every television in every airport, restaurant, and hotel lobby flashed the same numbers. 83 days. 82 days. 81 days. The tournament was approaching, and with it came a level of pressure I had never experienced before. I told myself it would calm down afterward. I told myself Natalie understood. I told myself a lot of things. One Thursday afternoon, my assistant handed me a cream-colored envelope between meetings. This was delivered by hand, she said. I opened it while walking. Inside was a simple invitation. Mercer Books Community Anniversary Celebration. Saturday, 6 o'clock. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. It read, I would really love for you to be there. Just one sentence. No guilt. No pressure. No argument. I stared at those words longer than I should have. Then my phone rang. Another crisis. Another urgent decision. I slipped the invitation into my briefcase and moved on. Saturday arrived. The bookstore anniversary was scheduled for 6. At 5:30, I was sitting inside a conference room surrounded by executives discussing international media contracts. At 6:15, someone ordered dinner. At 7, people were still arguing over details that suddenly felt absurdly important. Around 8:30, I finally remembered the invitation. My stomach sank. I checked my phone. 3 messages from Natalie. The first was a photo of the bookstore decorated with white paper lanterns. The second showed a crowd gathered outside holding cups of coffee and pastries. The third simply said, Hope your meeting goes well. No anger. No disappointment. Just kindness. Somehow that hurt more. When I got home close to midnight, the apartment lights were off except for a lamp glowing beside the couch. Natalie sat there wrapped in her gray sweater reading a novel. For a moment she looked peaceful. Distant but peaceful. I missed it, I said quietly. She marked her page and closed the book. I know. I am sorry. A faint smile touched her lips. I know that too.
He sat beside her.
The harbor lights shimmered beyond the windows. Somewhere below, a ferry horn echoed across the water. Usually she would tell me stories about the bookstore. Which customers showed up. Which children spent hours reading in the corner. Which local artists sold paintings on the sidewalk. Tonight she said nothing. The silence stretched between us. Then I noticed the wooden box resting on the coffee table. The lid was slightly open. Curiosity finally overcame me. Can I see it? I asked. Natalie looked at the box. Then at me. For a second I thought she might say no. Instead she pushed it toward me. Inside were dozens of ticket stubs, receipts, flyers, and folded pieces of paper. Small ordinary things. Yet every item had a date written on the back. A soccer match. A bookstore event. A concert by the harbor. A community picnic. A birthday dinner. Opportunities. Memories. Plans. All the moments we were supposed to share. My chest tightened as I picked up one of the tickets. The back contained a short handwritten sentence. Waited 2 hours. Another read maybe next time. Another simply said, came. Alone. I looked up at Natalie. She was watching me quietly. Not accusing. Not angry. Just tired. Then she spoke the words that lingered in my mind long after that night ended. You keep thinking these are small disappointments, Grant. But eventually small disappointments become someone's entire experience of loving you. For the next few days I could not stop thinking about that sentence. Small disappointments become someone's entire experience of loving you. It followed me into meetings. It sat beside me on flights. It echoed through hotel hallways and conference rooms long after conversations ended. Yet even then, I still did not understand how serious things had become. I thought awareness alone was progress. I thought recognizing the problem meant I was already fixing it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Natalie invited me to lunch. Nothing fancy. Just a small diner near the bookstore. The kind of place with red booths, handwritten specials on a chalkboard, and a waitress who knew half the customers by name. She asked me 3 weeks in advance. I even entered it into my calendar. That morning I fully intended to be there. Then everything started falling apart. A sponsor threatened to pull funding. A television contract hit an unexpected obstacle. 3 emergency calls arrived before 8 o'clock. By noon my schedule looked like a train wreck. Around 12:15 my phone buzzed. Natalie. I stared at her name for a second before answering. Hey. Her voice sounded warm. Hopeful. Are you close? My eyes moved around the conference room. Papers covered the table. Executives waited for my decision. The clock on the wall read 12:17. The diner was 20 minutes away. I do not think I can make it. Silence. Just a few seconds, but enough for me to feel it. Okay, she said. Natalie. It is fine. There was that word again. Fine. After we hung up, I told myself we would reschedule. There would be another lunch. Another day. Another chance. That evening, I stopped by the bookstore on my way home. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. The place smelled like coffee and old paper. A few customers browsed quietly between shelves. Natalie stood behind the register helping a little girl choose a novel. She smiled at the child. She laughed at something the girl said. Watching her from across the room, I felt something strange. It was the same woman I lived with. The same woman I saw every day. Yet somehow I had forgotten how much light she brought into other people's lives. When the store finally emptied, I walked over. I am sorry about lunch. She nodded. I know. Can we try again next week? She looked down at the register before answering. Maybe. Maybe. The word hit harder than I expected. Natalie used to say yes. She used to move mountains to make room for me. Now I was getting maybe. On the counter beside her sat a folded flyer. I glanced at it absent-mindedly. Community reading day. Saturday morning. Natalie noticed my eyes move toward it. You do not have to promise anything, she said gently. I was not going to. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her smile faded. Not dramatically. Just enough. Just a fraction. But I saw it. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she nodded slowly and tucked the flyer beneath the counter. That is probably for the best. As I drove home later that night, rain tapped softly against the windshield. The harbor lights blurred beyond the glass. And for the first time, a thought entered my mind that I immediately tried to ignore. What if Natalie was not asking me to show up anymore because she had finally accepted that I would not? The weeks that followed felt strangely calm. Not because life became easier. If anything, the pressure surrounding the tournament doubled. But something had changed inside our apartment. Natalie stopped asking. She stopped reminding. She stopped hoping out loud. First, I thought that would make things easier. Fewer arguments. Fewer awkward conversations. Fewer moments where I had to confront the disappointment in her eyes. Instead, it created something far worse. Distance. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The sky outside was painted orange and gold as the sun disappeared behind the harbor. For once, there were no emergency calls. No meetings. No flights waiting for me. The apartment was quiet. Natalie stood in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the room. Soft music played from a small radio near the window. It should have felt comforting. Familiar. Instead, it felt like I had walked into someone else's life. You are home early, she said. Looks that way. She smiled politely and returned to cooking. That was it. No excitement. No questions. No stories about her day. I stood there longer than necessary waiting for something. Waiting for the version of Natalie who used to run over and tell me about a new customer at the bookstore or a funny conversation she overheard at the cafe. That Natalie never appeared. During dinner, I noticed she kept checking her phone. Not constantly. Just enough for me to notice. A small smile crossed her face once as she read a message. Something tightened in my chest. Who is that? I asked. She looked up. Emma. Emma. The librarian from the community center. I nodded. The strange feeling remained. After dinner, Natalie grabbed her jacket. I am heading out. Where? The question came out faster than I intended. She paused near the door. Community reading night. I did not know you had plans. She smiled gently. You did. I mentioned it last week. I searched my memory. Nothing. She had probably told me. I had probably been looking at my phone. The realization left an unpleasant taste in my mouth. Will you be late? She tilted her head slightly. Does it matter? The words were not cruel. They were not angry. They were honest. That made them hurt more. After she left, I wandered through the apartment alone. The silence felt enormous. My eyes landed on the bookshelf near the living room window. There were framed photographs everywhere. Vacations. Birthday dinners. Walks along the harbor. Years of memories. Yet something immediately stood out. In nearly every picture, Natalie was looking directly at me. Smiling at me. Waiting for me to notice her. My throat tightened. I moved to the most recent photograph. It had been taken at a bookstore event 2 months earlier. Natalie stood in front of a display of novels. She was smiling. But this time she was not looking at me. She was looking somewhere else entirely. For the first time in years, Natalie Mercer looked like someone building a life that did not depend on whether I showed up or not. And sitting alone in that quiet apartment, I realized that scared me far more than any crisis I had faced at work. The closer the tournament came, the less I seemed to recognize my own life. Every day was measured by deadlines. Every week disappeared beneath contracts, interviews, security briefings, and endless travel. Yet somehow, despite being busier than ever, I found myself noticing things I had ignored for years. Natalie stopped waiting up for me at night. She stopped texting to ask when I would be home. She stopped leaving little notes beside the coffee maker reminding me about community events or bookstore projects. At first the changes were so small they barely registered. Then one Saturday morning I woke up and realized the apartment was empty. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. The harbor shimmered beyond the windows. The clock read 9:15. Normally Natalie would have been curled up in the armchair near the window with a book and a mug of coffee. Instead there was only silence. I found a note on the kitchen counter. Helping with the literacy fair today. Have a good weekend. No heart drawn beside her name. No place el joke. No mention of when she would be back. Just information. I stood there staring at the note longer than necessary. Then my phone rang and the moment disappeared beneath another avalanche of work. That afternoon, while reviewing event schedules, I received an unexpected message from Emma, the librarian Natalie had mentioned weeks earlier. There was a photo attached. Natalie stood beneath a white tent surrounded by children holding books. Her smile looked genuine, bright, effortless. The caption read, "We raised enough money to expand the reading program. Could not have done it without Natalie." I looked at the photo several times. Something about it bothered me. Not because she looked happy, because she looked happy without me. The realization followed me through the rest of the day. By evening, I found myself driving toward the community center instead of heading home. The parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived. Volunteers were folding tables and loading boxes into cars. Natalie stood near the entrance laughing with a group of teachers and librarians. I stayed inside my car for a moment watching her. She looked lighter somehow, more relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Then she spotted me. Her smile remained, but it changed. Softer, more distant. She walked over. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I wanted to see how it went. She nodded. It went really well. For a second I waited for her to tell me everything. The funny stories. The little details. The moments she loved most. Instead she simply stood there. Comfortable. Calm. Complete. "You seem happy," I said. She glanced back toward the volunteers. "I am." The answer should have reassured me. Instead it left an ache in my chest I could not explain. On the drive home, Natalie talked about future projects, new partnerships, reading programs, community events, plans stretching months into the future. I listened carefully. Then I noticed something unsettling. Not once during the entire conversation did she mention us. Not once did she talk about things we would do together. Every plan, every goal, every dream seemed to belong entirely to her own future. And for the first time, I began to wonder if I was no longer included in it. The breaking point did not arrive with a dramatic argument. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday evening. That was what made it so dangerous. Most people expect life-changing moments to announce themselves. Ours slipped quietly through the front door carrying grocery bags and wearing a tired smile. I had spent the entire day dealing with final preparations. The tournament was only weeks away now. Every conversation felt urgent. Every decision carried weight. By the time I reached home, my head was pounding. Natalie was in the kitchen unpacking groceries. A loaf of bread, fresh vegetables, a bouquet of wildflowers wrapped in brown paper. Small ordinary things. The kind of things that make a house feel lived in. "How was your day?" she asked. "Long." She nodded. "Mine too." I dropped my keys onto the counter and opened my laptop. Emails flooded the screen immediately. Across the room, Natalie carefully trimmed the flower stems and placed them into a glass vase. Yellow and white blooms brightened the apartment instantly. I barely noticed. A few minutes later, she sat beside me at the kitchen island. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you remember next Thursday?" My fingers continued moving across the keyboard. "Should I?" Silence. When I finally looked up, she was studying me. Not with anger. Not even disappointment. Just curiosity. As if she already knew the answer. "It would have been 8 years," she said softly. The words landed harder than they should have. 8 years. I had forgotten. Completely. Natalie looked down at her hands and smiled faintly. "That is okay. I figured you might." Shame flickered through me. Brief and uncomfortable. Before I could respond, my phone rang. One of the executives. I answered immediately. The call lasted nearly 40 minutes. When it finally ended, Natalie was no longer sitting beside me. Later that night, I found her on the balcony overlooking the harbor. The city lights shimmered across the water. A cool breeze lifted strands of her hair. She stood there quietly holding a mug of tea. "I am sorry about earlier," I said. She nodded. "I know." There was that phrase again. "I know." Not because she believed me, because she expected it. That realization settled heavily in my chest. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me. "Do you know something strange?" she asked. "What?" Her eyes remained fixed on the water. "I used to imagine what our future would look like all the time." I waited. "Now." A small smile touched her lips. "Now I mostly think about my own future." The words were gentle, calm, yet they struck harder than any accusation ever could. Because for the first time, I heard the truth hidden beneath them. Natalie was not threatening to leave. She was not trying to punish me. She had simply started letting go. And standing beside her beneath the harbor lights, I realized something terrifying. The woman who had spent years waiting for me was finally learning how to live without me. The day everything finally broke apart began with applause. Thousands of people filled the convention center as cameras flashed and reporters crowded around the stage. The final international press conference before the tournament was being broadcast across the country. Every speech, every announcement, every handshake mattered. I had spent months working toward this moment. By every professional measure, it was a success. Yet from the second I woke up that morning, something felt wrong. Natalie had already left before sunrise. A note sat beside the coffee maker. "Good luck today. I know how much this means to you." No heart. No joke. No mention of seeing me afterward. Just a simple message written in careful handwriting. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket without thinking. The event lasted most of the day. Interviews blended together. Questions repeated. Smiles became automatic. Every few minutes my phone buzzed with congratulations. Investors. Sponsors, politicians, executives. Everyone seemed excited. Everyone except the one person whose opinion suddenly mattered most. Around 5 o'clock, I finally checked my personal messages. There was one from Natalie. "Can we have dinner tonight? Just us." My chest tightened. It should have been an easy request. A normal request. Yet I stared at my schedule and immediately saw problems. An executive dinner had been arranged months ago. International guests were attending. Contracts would be discussed. Relationships strengthened. Opportunities created. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally I called her. She answered after the second ring. Hey. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. Natalie, tonight is difficult. Silence. Then a soft exhale. Of course it is. Can we do tomorrow? More silence. Tomorrow. Something about the way she repeated the word made me uncomfortable. Yes. Tomorrow. She did not argue. She did not try to convince me. Okay, Grant. Then she hung up. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Yet it stayed with me throughout the evening. During dinner, people toasted future success. They talked about legacy, achievement, history. I smiled at the right moments. Answered questions. I played my role perfectly. But every time someone raised a glass, I found myself thinking about Natalie sitting alone somewhere in the city, waiting. Again. By the time I returned home, it was nearly midnight. The apartment was dark except for a single lamp near the window. Natalie sat curled up in the armchair with a blanket over her knees. A book rested unopened in her lap. She looked up when I entered. You are still awake. I was reading. I loosened my tie and sat across from her. The harbor lights reflected against the glass behind her. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me. Grant, can I ask you something? Anything. Her eyes met mine. Steady. Serious. If there was only room for one thing in your life right now, what would you choose? I laughed softly. That is not a fair question. She did not smile. Answer it anyway. My mind immediately went to the tournament. The years of work. The responsibility. The pressure. The dream I had chased for so long. And without realizing it, I gave the answer that would change everything. The answer Natalie would never forget. The answer I would spend the next year wishing I could take back. I wish I could tell you I hesitated before answering. I wish I could tell you I looked at Natalie and understood what she was really asking. But that is not what happened. I was tired, distracted, trapped inside a mindset that had ruled my life for years. Success first, everything else later. So I answered honestly. Right now, the tournament has to come first. The words left my mouth so easily. As if they were obvious. As if any reasonable person would understand. Natalie stared at me for several seconds. Not shocked. Not angry. Just very, very still. Then she nodded once. I see. That was all she said. No argument followed.
No tears. No dramatic confrontation.
Looking back, that should have terrified me. Because people fight when they still believe there is something worth saving. They stop fighting when they have run out of hope. I did not understand that then. I only felt relieved that the conversation had ended peacefully. We went to bed shortly afterward. The next morning I left. Before sunrise for another series of meetings. Natalie was still asleep. At least I thought she was. The room was dark except for a thin strip of light creeping through the curtains. I remember standing beside the bed for a moment, thinking I should wake her, thinking I should apologize, thinking I should say something meaningful. Instead, I checked the time, grabbed my phone, and walked out the door. The following week disappeared beneath a storm of activity. Final inspections, international arrivals, security reviews, media appearances. Every day felt like it contained 48 hours instead of 24. During one television interview, the host asked what sacrifice had been required to reach this moment. I laughed and gave some polished answer about hard work and commitment. The audience applauded. The cameras kept rolling. Yet something about the question lingered afterward. What had I sacrificed? The answer appeared unexpectedly 2 nights later. I arrived home around 10. Natalie sat at the dining table sorting paperwork from the bookstore. A stack of applications rested beside her. Maps. Brochures. Housing information. I frowned. What is all this? Nothing important. It looks important. She hesitated. Then she slid one of the brochures toward me. It featured a photograph of a small coastal town nearly 300 miles away. White beaches. Fishing docks. Historic buildings. They offered me a position helping expand a literacy program. I looked up. You applied somewhere else? She nodded. A while ago. Something shifted inside my chest. Why did you not tell me? Her expression softened. Not with affection. With sadness. Because every time I tried talking about my future, you were busy planning yours. The room fell silent. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Somewhere in the harbor, a ship horn echoed through the darkness. I looked down at the brochure again. 300 miles away. A different town. A different life. Suddenly the possibility felt real. Natalie was not imagining a future without me anymore. She was actively building one. And for the first time, fear pushed through the walls I had spent years constructing. Around myself. Because deep down I knew something I was not ready to admit. If Natalie ever truly decided to leave, I had given her every reason to go. After that conversation, something changed in me. Not enough to fix anything. Not enough to stop what was coming. But enough to make me pay attention. The problem was that attention had arrived years too late. The next morning I found myself standing inside Natalie's bookstore before opening hours. It had been a long time since I had visited during the day. Usually I was working, traveling, chasing the next deadline. The bell above the door chimed softly as I stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through the front windows, casting warm rectangles across the wooden floor. Shelves lined the walls. The smell of coffee drifted from the cafe corner. It was beautiful, comfortable, alive. And I suddenly realized how little I knew about the place that consumed so much of Natalie's heart. She emerged from a back room carrying a stack of books. Surprise flashed across her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I had some free time." Even as I said it, the excuse sounded strange. Free time. The words barely existed in my vocabulary anymore. Natalie set the books down and smiled politely. "Well, welcome." We spent the next hour together. At least physically. Customers came and went. Children wandered toward the reading corner. Volunteers discussed upcoming literacy programs. People greeted Natalie constantly. They thanked her, hugged her, asked for advice, shared stories about books she had recommended. Watching her move through the store felt like watching someone in their natural habitat. Confident, purposeful, needed. For years I had assumed Natalie's life revolved around me. Standing there, I realized how arrogant that assumption had been. Her life had always been bigger than our relationship. I had simply been too distracted to notice. Around noon, an elderly customer approached the register. "You must be Grant," she said warmly. "Natalie talks about you all the time." My chest tightened unexpectedly. "She does." The woman smiled. "She used to." Used to. Two simple words. Yet they landed with surprising force. Natalie looked away quickly, pretending to organize receipts. The customer continued chatting, unaware of the damage she had done. But I heard it. Natalie heard it too. Used to. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, we walked together toward a small cafe near the harbor. For the first time in months, there were no meetings waiting for me. No flights. No conference calls. Just a quiet afternoon. The kind Natalie had been asking for all along. We sat near the window watching boats move across the water. For a little while, conversation came easily. We talked about books, local events, childhood memories. The version of us I thought had disappeared began to flicker back to life. Then Natalie glanced at her watch. I should get back. Disappointment surprised me. Already. She smiled gently. I have things to do. Things to do. Plans. Commitments. A life that no longer adjusted itself around my schedule. As we stepped outside, a cool breeze rolled in from the harbor. Natalie tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and looked out toward the water. "You know what is strange?" she asked softly. "What?" Her eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "For years I kept hoping you would finally choose us. Then one day I stopped hoping." My stomach dropped. Because deep down I knew something terrifying. Hope can return. Trust can be rebuilt. But when someone stops hoping altogether, they have already begun saying goodbye. The final week before the tournament arrived like a tidal wave. Everywhere I looked, the city was preparing. Banners hung from buildings. News crews filled the streets. International visitors crowded hotels and restaurants. The entire world seemed to be holding its breath. And somehow, in the middle of all that excitement, I was losing my grip on the one thing that actually mattered. Natalie and I still shared the same apartment. We still ate dinner at the same table. We still exchanged polite conversations about our days. From the outside, nothing appeared broken. But the truth was far more dangerous. We had become strangers who knew each other's routines. One evening I came home carrying tickets. Not work credentials. Not event passes. Actual tickets. 2. Seats for a match that people would have paid a fortune to attend. Months earlier, Natalie would have been thrilled. I walked into the apartment feeling strangely hopeful. Maybe it was not too late. Maybe one thoughtful gesture could rebuild some of what I had neglected. Natalie was sitting near the window reading. The familiar gray sweater draped loosely around her shoulders. For a second, she looked exactly like the woman I had fallen in love with years ago. "I have a surprise," I said. She lowered her book. I placed the tickets on the table between us. Opening week. Great seats. For the first time in months, genuine surprise crossed her face. She picked them up carefully, studied them, then looked at me. "You remembered." I did. Silence filled the room. Hope stirred inside me. Then Natalie smiled sadly. A year ago, this would have meant everything. The words hit harder than I expected. "What about now?" She glanced back down at the tickets. "Now it just feels late." My chest tightened. Not because she was being cruel. Because she was telling the truth. For years, I had treated attention like a reward I could hand out whenever convenient. I had assumed the people who loved me would always wait. Standing there, I finally understood something painful. Timing matters. A flower offered after years of neglect does not erase the empty garden. Natalie set the tickets back on the table. I appreciate the gesture. Gesture. Not promise. Not memory. Gesture. The distance between those words felt enormous. Later that night I could not sleep. The apartment was dark except for moonlight reflecting off the harbor. I wandered into the living room and noticed the wooden box resting on the bookshelf. Slowly I opened it. Inside were years of memories. Ticket stubs. Flyers. Receipts. Small pieces of paper that meant nothing to anyone else. Picked one up. Then another. Then another. Every item carried a handwritten note. Waited until 9. Saved you a seat. Thought you might come. Maybe next time. My throat tightened. The entries stretched back for years. Hundreds of tiny moments. Hundreds of disappointments I barely remembered creating. Near the bottom of the box I found the oldest note. The handwriting looked younger. More hopeful. Simply read, "He is busy but he loves me." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I looked toward the bedroom where Natalie was sleeping. And for the first time in my life, success felt incredibly small. Because I finally understood what I had spent years refusing to see. Natalie had not stopped loving me all at once. She had been losing a little piece of that hope every time I failed to show up. And I was running out of chances before there was nothing left to lose. The opening match arrived beneath a sky full of fireworks. The city pulsed with energy. Crowds filled the streets. Television cameras captured every celebration. From the outside, it was the greatest night of my professional life. Years of work had led to this moment. Every stadium was ready. Every broadcast was live. Every headline called the event a historic success. Yet all I could think about was the empty side of the bed I had noticed that morning. Natalie had left before sunrise. That was not unusual anymore. What was unusual was the feeling sitting in my chest. A quiet certainty that something was ending. The ceremony lasted late into the evening. Applause followed every speech. Reporters asked questions. Executives shook my hand. People congratulated me as if I had won something. Around midnight, exhausted and emotionally numb, I finally returned home. The apartment was silent. No lamp glowed near the window. No music drifted from the kitchen. No book rested on the armchair. The silence felt different this time.
Permanent.
My pulse quickened as I walked through the rooms. The bedroom closet stood half empty. The bookshelf near the living room had gaps where photographs once stood. The gray sweater was gone. So was Natalie. For several seconds I simply stood there. Not moving. Not thinking. Then I saw it. The wooden box resting alone on the dining table. Beside it sat a folded envelope with my name written across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Grant, if you are reading this, it means I finally did what I should have done a long time ago. This is not punishment. This is not revenge. I do not hate you. The truth is much simpler. I got tired of waiting to be chosen. I spent years believing that if I loved you enough, eventually there would be room for me in your life. But love should not feel like standing in line forever hoping someone notices you. I hope the tournament is everything you dreamed it would be.
I trulido.
But I need to build a life where my happiness is not scheduled around someone else's priorities. Thank you for the memories. Goodbye, Natalie. I lowered the letter slowly. The apartment blurred around me. Then I opened the wooden box. Hundreds of memories waited inside. Ticket stubs, receipts, flyers, notes, tiny pieces of a life we had shared. Near the bottom sat one final item I had never seen before. A photograph. It showed Natalie standing outside her bookstore years earlier. She was smiling directly at the camera. On the back, she had written a sentence in careful handwriting. I kept believing he would choose us. That was the moment everything finally became clear. Natalie had not left because of one conversation. She had not left because of one forgotten anniversary or one missed dinner. She had left because I had spent years teaching her exactly where she ranked in my priorities. And eventually she believed me. As fireworks exploded outside and the entire world celebrated the success I had worked so hard to achieve, I sat alone at the table holding the evidence of every moment that truly mattered. For the first time in my life, I understood the difference between building a legacy and building a life. And by the time I learned that lesson, the person who should have heard it was already gone. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe, like, and share. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what is one person in your life you never want to take for granted? We'll see you in the next story.